very excited to have Dr. Loren Nations on this live broadcast because he's going to be joining us as a speaker at Metabolic Health Summit 2019, which is January 31st through February 3rd. But he's bringing such a unique perspective to the summit. We're so thankful to have you there because, you know, we think so much about metabolic therapy and the ketogenic diet and its application with us, right? Rightfully so, and its application in disease and performance. But what about our best friends? What about the animals that are our companions? And you are the visionary behind Veterinary Healthcare Associates, and you've also implemented a lot of metabolic therapies into the mix at your practice, which is a 24-hour emergency practice and referral practice. And so I'm excited to dive in today, and I want to introduce people to you. And first of all, let's start with how this sort of started for you. I know, unfortunately, it came out of a place that was quite tragic, but it's really led you to help so many people and so many animals along the way. If you want to explain.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I hope to make this little snippet on our conversation worthwhile for everybody waiting and being patient with us. So again, we apologize for the technical difficulties, but this has been just an incredible experience for me in a number of different ways. And I want to first acknowledge the people and the shoulders that we're standing on. It starts with Otto Warburg back in the 1920s, an incredible scientist and pioneer in observations in cancer. So that's really where a lot of this came from. I certainly feel that Dr. Thomas Seyfried, who's going to be speaking at our summit, is again the shoulders that I'm standing on specifically, as well as Travis Christofferson, who wrote the book Tripping Over the Truth, which is based off of the history and certainly what Dr. Seyfried has written in his book as well, and also Dr. Dominic D'Agostino and his laboratory, and then the what we call the entrepreneurial missionaries from Quest and Epigenetics, and that's where you came from as well, Victoria. So I just feel extremely blessed to be able to be included in this incredible summit. That being said, my journey is really, it's very, very short in a timeline. I mean, I have been involved in this particular aspect of cancer therapy and metabolics 2 years. And so what I've learned and what I'm going to be sharing is taking the information that I've learned and gleaned from these incredible scientists and researchers and applying that into our veterinary patients. And so that's been my function and challenge in applying these. How this all kind of came about was, you know, I'm a veterinarian. I've been practicing for a long time. We'll just say several decades, and doing that in a very specialized way. We have a very been blessed to have an incredible facility. We've got 24-hour emergency critical care, specialty services, and general practice. I now completely specialize in oncology and internal medicine. So I'm not boarded in either of those disciplines. I'm boarded in what's called the American Board of Veterinary Practitioners, which is a species-specific board certification. And my species are canine and feline, or essentially companion animals. So I've been practicing, hopefully at a high level, and have been working in the cancer realm, doing conventional chemotherapy. And when we talk about conventional chemotherapy on the human side in veterinary, it's the same. It's chemotherapy, it's surgery, and it's radiation. And those are the tools that we have in the toolbox, at least what we have had on a conventional, quote, standard of care model. Obviously, there's alternative therapies, there's herbals, and a whole host of different options. But quite honestly, most of those have not really gained traction. There's been very, very research or understanding in some of those modalities. They certainly aren't mainstream, even though they probably should be. My experience was started on a personal level with my second wife, who very shortly after our honeymoon found a lump in her breast, and it turned out to be a triple negative breast cancer back in 2015. We were at Moffitt Cancer Center, went through all the conventional therapies, also looked at alternative therapies as well, and went down that path. She had bilateral mastectomies in the fall of 2015. 2019 and everything good as far as standard of care. Very tragically and unfortunately, in March of 2018, she was re-diagnosed with highly advanced metastatic breast cancer, and it was essentially throughout her entire body. At that point, being a healer, being a husband, and trying to save her, help her in the situation, I really went deep and looked at all the alternatives. I came across, at that time, Travis Christofferson's book, immediately read that, came in contact and contacted some of the people in that book, Young Hee Ko being one of those, which if you guys read the book or at some point, I think it's worthwhile if you're interested in this realm. And I just went and trying to figure out, what does this really look like? And it became quite evident that the tools that we have in standard of care just are not moving the dial, and we were missing something. And that something really is this concept of the origin of cancer. Through that and that experience, unfortunately, my wife died tragically just 5 weeks after she was re-diagnosed. And so at that point, for me to make sense of this whole experience and her loss, I went deep. When I say I went deep personally and emotionally and religiously and on a medical basis. And I really got to a point where I realized that everything that I learned, or at least that I thought that I knew, was either misguided or it was just flat out wrong. And especially after reading through all of that information, I started reaching across the fence, so to speak, and looking at what was really available in the human realm as well as the veterinary realm. What I realized was that even though I assumed that all the information that was being assimilated and created in the research, that everybody knew what was going on. We think that in the world of connectivity, that information is easily disseminated to all those people that are the ones on the forefront that should be making the changes and moving the. Right. And I found that absolutely was not the truth.
Yep.
And so I started what I call following the breadcrumbs. And it first started with meeting and following Dr. Seyfried's work. And I remember he was lecturing in New York. I got a plane ticket and I hopped on a plane and I heard him speak in Long Island. Met him and talked to him and was just astounded and amazed with what he had done. And he asked me, he said, "Have you heard this place called Ketopet Sanctuary? There's this place in Texas where they are treating dogs with cancer with a ketogenic diet and hyperbaric oxygen." I said, that's impossible. That would be something about that. And sure enough, this place actually existed. And so that was a breadcrumb. And I thought, oh my gosh, I got to go there. So guess what? I got on a plane and I went and I visited Ketopet Sanctuary. And sure enough, and I would reference the website. Anybody, veterinarians or pet parents that are interested in a ketogenic diet, go to Ketopet Sanctuary. And Victoria has got her DNA and her blood, sweat, and tears on the website because she needed it. And
yep, a little bit of that.
And it's like, for me, it was like Area 54. Like, how does this place exist? And the breadcrumb led me to a company called Quest and Quest Nutrition and Epigenics, the foundation, which is sponsoring the Metabolic Health Summit. So guess what? I had to get on a plane. And I flew out to LA, and that's actually where I first met Victoria when she was working out there. And so I started collaborating with the founders, these incredible visionaries that wanted to change the world. They were going to cure cancer, just not realizing that it's a big piece. That's pretty lofty goals, but guess what? They're the dial. And so I got intrigued, and we started working through this. I guess one of the first things for everybody to realize is that I was a skeptic. I mean, as a veterinarian, when I started looking at the ketogenic diet, and I was familiar with the ketogenic diet, had already been on the ketogenic diet and personally felt the effects from it. But, a ketogenic diet, in particular the ketogenic diet that they had formulated at Ketopet Sanctuary, from a veterinary standpoint, first of all, it's very high fat. So which is something that in vet school, we're taught that fat is bad. That causes pancreatitis. Not only was it a high fat diet, it was a raw diet. And there is a whole lot of questions and concerns about feeding pets raw diets on a number of different levels. And some of them are valid, and I think some of them are probably not necessarily as valid as we think. So I was incredibly skeptical of this as a diet for any type of patient, whether they had cancer or not. But I saw the data, and then I started really thinking about it and looking into it. And sure enough, we decided that it made sense. It really, really made sense from everything that I could find. So we started implementing it. And we started first with a couple animals. We were working very closely with Victoria and Shannon Kessel, who was also instrumental in Ketopet. Both are very dear friends right now, and I admire what they have done for Ketopet, ketogenic diets in animals.
So we admire you and what you're doing because it's so important in continuing that on, right?
Yeah. So we started just using these diets, and patients, the vast majority of them were veterinary cancer patients, dogs almost exclusively, that we've been using this concept in, at least in. And I'm not saying it's not valid for cats. We just don't have the diets kind of worked out yet. But I think that's an easy progression. We just need to do a little bit more work. So those, if you see behind me, my the feline, let me, oops. Oh my gosh.
I love it. So he's clearly a cat man right there. And that may be the next step. I know you talked about, coming up with maybe a plan for cats and whatnot. And thank you, first of all, for sharing such a personal piece of your story. And I just think, it's just so inspiring that you took this horrible situation, with your wife, and then unfortunately she passed, but you took that and you've turned it into something to where you're actually channeling, the grief and that experience into doing something positive and helping so many people and so many animals through the process, and speaking and educating. And that really takes a certain kind of person. So thank you for what you've been able to do over the last couple of years. And although it's been, what seems like a short amount of time, you have made such incredible, I'm pretty sure you're superhuman, because the progress you've made in terms of what you've established into your clinic, the board that you're now associated with, Hyperbaric Medical Association, and where you're going with that, is just nothing short of really profound and inspiring. And we're very thankful to have you at the conference, because our mission is to really open this event up in future years. I have you represent from a veterinarian perspective, but continue to push that forward, because I only think it's a matter of time before, we're so thoughtful of our nutrition approach and what we put in our bodies, but we really need to take another look at what we're giving our dogs, our cats, our animals, really the family members, and what's coming out of what you're getting off a store shelf, and maybe is that really the best option for them, and does it make sense to feed them the same thing for the entirety of their lives, right? So what are some, if you want to go into detail about maybe HBOT, because I know we've actually got Dr. Angela Poff, who's here watching, one of the co-hosts of Metabolic Health Summit. Dr. Kessel is in the room as well. But if you want to explain how some of the important work that they've done through, alongside Dominic D'Agostino and the lab at USF, and how you use that as a platform to also implement HBOT in a way that not many veterinarians are in their practice.
Yeah, and so that taking the concept of, again, a raw, high-fat ketogenic diet, and then implementing and using that with hyperbaric oxygen therapy, just was a kind of one of those mind-blowing concepts, especially in veterinary medicine. Hyperbaric oxygen is a modality that's been available on the human side for a number of 30, 40 years. It came from hyperbaric medicine, from diving and the bends. That's how most people probably associate hyperbaric oxygen therapy. At Dominic's lab with Angela and Shannon, what they were looking at was how do they augment it, or how does hyperbaric oxygen therapy augment what can be done with cancer. One of the interesting things was that hyperbaric oxygen is known for wound healing and accelerating growth and anti-inflammatory and really helping to heal diabetic wounds. There's 14 different indications that are FDA approved, and on the human side, most of those are in regeneration in a lot of instances. And so the concept of using hyperbaric oxygen to treat cancer is kind of like, oh my gosh, like absolutely, we're not going to do that because we're just going to be flaming the fans of fire and causing the cancer to grow exponentially if we're filling it with oxygen. Okay. And that, again, that belief was based on a model that cancer is biologically the same as normal health. And we know categorically it's almost diametrically the opposite. And so the Warburg effect is one. And so coming back to the Warburg effect, basically that is a process with normal cell that creates energy using oxygen in aerobic capacity. So if we do aerobics, we're breathing and we're burning, or we're using oxygen and glucose together, and we're kicking out 38 units of ATP, which are kind of an energy unit. That's the energy coin of exchange in our body. It's very efficient. We also can kick into an anaerobic phase, which is if we go out and do sprints, we're able to get ATP very quickly, but it's very inefficient. It's not using oxygen. And instead of us getting 38 units, we're actually only getting 2 units. That can be used when we need energy fast. And so that's where that system comes from. The bottom line with the Warburg effect is that cancer cells, or the vast majority of them, have some abnormality in their ability to use or create energy, and they almost preferentially burn it anaerobically in an inefficient way, and that creates a lot of lactic acid, and that's what we see. And in the microenvironment, or in the tumor environment, it's very highly acidic. And so what we know now is that if we hyperoxygenate those tissues and go from a hypoxic or low oxygen state to a hyperoxygenated state, those tissues are exposed to a lot of what are called free radicals, and that hyperbaric oxygen, or that higher level of oxygen that's delivered, actually can act almost as a chemotherapeutic drug in certain scenarios. And the benefit, and the thing that's really incredible, is that that's non-toxic to normal healthy cells. So that's the whole concept with this metabolic therapy in cancer metabolism, that we're using things that are going to augment, and in a lot of it, actually make normal cells healthier, which in a disease process like cancer, the underlying environment why our bodies have cancer in it is because there's some abnormality in kind of a disease process that's occurring. So if we're able to find non-toxic therapies, and we'll kind of come back to diet, because I think that's a really, really fundamental piece to what Dr. D'Agostino and Seyfried are calling this press-pulse theory, or method of treating cancer. And so hyperbaric oxygen is one of those modalities. We're using that now, and every single one of our cancer patients gets hyperbaric. Victoria, let me talk just a little about this press. I think that that'll kind of help people understand how we use hyperbaric oxygen.
Sure.
So if we can stress a cancer cell and put it in a scenario where it's fighting for its life in a sense, cancer cells are very, very resilient, and they can adapt and change whenever they're stressed. Even though they're very, very, I guess, resilient in that capacity, they're energetics and they are somewhat fragile. So if we can stress those cancer cells with diet, we can cut off their energy supply. If we glucose, which is what a ketogenic diet is doing, all of a sudden that cancer cell is now struggling or starving for fuel. If we can push that cell a little bit further with, that's the press. So if we're constantly pressing that scenario, there you go. So if we're constantly pressing that cancer cell, and then we pulse it with hyperbaric oxygen or even chemotherapy, and still use conventional chemo, but there are certainly a lot of indications scenarios where it does work, we can have a much greater effect on the cancer in a non-toxic and healthy way, as opposed to just hammering them with a pure chemotherapy kind of protocol or radiation, whatever that looks like. So,
right, yeah. No, thank you for that explanation for people who are sort of watching and not too familiar with things like HBOT, as well as the ketogenic diet. And you really sort of, used Ketopet's protocol and have made it your own in many ways, and are sort of, the Ketopet of the East Coast, if you will, and are really taking it to a whole another level by also combining it alongside other therapies like HBOT, where, in most cases, HBOT is traditionally used, I would say, with veterinarians in emergency type situations, maybe only. It's fair. It can be fairly challenging to find that. One, as a cancer patient, being a human cancer patient, it can be challenging sometimes to find that type of a therapy, and especially when it comes to our best friends. So what would you say is next for you? And where would you like to see the future of metabolic therapy go, specifically as it relates to our animals?
Well, I think that there's, a couple different things that we're looking at, and pieces yet have completely worked out. But I have a clear vision and idea of what that looks like. In my mind, so cancer is, in my mind, a symptom of a disease. And what I mean by that is, and you and I have talked about this before, is that when we think about disease processes, and on the human side, if we look at longevity studies and how we die, so what are the things that are going to cause us ultimately to die? And take out genetics, because genetics does have a piece. Genetics is estimated to be somewhere between 5 and 10%. So if you get dealt a bad deck of cards, and there's a predisposition to certain ailments, and so that is something that we have to be aware of. But it's not as much as we think specifically. Most of the other, take out accidents, so you step out in front of a bus or whatever that looks like. Vast majority of diseases are accounted for by what they call the 4 Horsemen. This is on the human side, but there's a lot of application in the veterinary realm as well. The 4 Horsemen of death are cardiovascular disease, number 1. So that's stroke or heart attack, number 1 killer. Number 2 is cancer. Number 3 is neurodegenerative, which is Alzheimer's disease, what they're actually calling type 3 diabetes now. And number 4 is metabolic issues and diseases, so type 2 diabetes, and then all of the sequelae that occurs from that. And that accounts for the reason why we are going to die, essentially, in most instances. All of those are, I think about it like a tree, and all of those are the branch leaves at the very end of the tree. And it takes a long period of time to get there. And there's underlying reasons why that occurs. And if you look at the longevity studies and things that really move the dial and cause all of those to occur, ultimately it's a result of inflammation in the body. That's the bottom line, is that the more inflammation we have, the more the system is going to corrode and break down, and we're going to get one of those conditions. It's a matter of not if, but which one it is. So if what I've realized is that if we're treating cancer, we can treat the disease, but if we don't address the underlying inflammation and the reason to get there, then it's either going to come back in some other form, or in people, there's a likelihood that you're going to die of one of those other ones, because they're all kind of the same underlying process.
Right.
I think that in identifying this, for me, it's given a much, even though cancer is a huge, huge area and topic, I really think that the work and what we're seeing, in particular, like the Metabolic Health Summit, because this gives you all of the tools, not only for just if you're struggling or dealing with cancer, but also how do we prevent cancer? Because that's ultimately the best cure for it, is just to not get it. So moving down the tree, we're looking at the low-hanging fruit. So diet starts with that. I think ultimately we're using a ketogenic diet therapeutically. How strict that needs to be and what the macronutrient ratios are. Does it have to be 80%, 4-to-1, or can it be something less than that? My feeling is that that's pretty stringent, and therapeutically, that's probably necessary. But the bottom line is just cutting out carbohydrates. So get on as low a carbohydrate diet as possible. Eat good quality foods. That's what we're doing. There are a whole host of other things that we are looking at. So hyperbaric oxygen is huge. And again, that's a modality that on the veterinary side, it's interesting because we have a hyperbaric chamber at my hospital.
I've seen it. It's really cool. His hospital is unbelievable. If you ever are out in Winter Haven, Florida, you have to check out VHA, Veterinary Healthcare Associates. I was blown away by what you have out there. Anyways, continue.
We'll give you the e-ticket tour of the practice. So we'd love to. But yeah, so we had hyperbaric oxygen before I was even involved in this cancer quest, and we're one of only 50 hospitals in the nation that have a hyperbaric oxygen chamber in a veterinary hospital. Maybe there's more than that, but we're certainly one of less than 100 practices. So there's a little bit of predestiny as far as why I'm doing and why we're doing what we're doing with hyperbaric.
Yeah.
But then there's also, and I'll just kind of rattle off a couple other things that we're doing, because we're looking at there's a lot of different compounds that are nutritional that affect this Warburg principle, that are kind of either a pulse type of therapy, and I'll just mention something like high dose IV vitamin C combined with hyperbaric oxygen. There's some compounds like DCA, dichloroacetate, which has been something that I know Dom's lab has been working with, and Angela, you're probably much more familiar with that than I am, but we have used that. That coupled with something called lipoic acid in a formulation called poly-MBA. Certainly 3-bromopyruvate is another compound that we've actually used. I'm a dear friend with Dr. Young-Hee Ko. She is absolutely brilliant and has found a molecule that could have really incredible implications for the new delivery of treatment for cancer. So we've treated a couple patients with 3BP. And there's a whole host of other things. And now there's repurposing of drugs and using things like atorvastatin, Lipitor, which is an anti-cholesterol medication. There's use with things like antiparasiticides, mebendazole, and antibiotics, and a whole host of other different compounds. So my goal is to find a protocol where we're able to use all of these non-toxic types of therapies, and then if we still need to use conventional, I'm fine with that. Like, I will use any tool that I need to. I don't want to metabolically make our animals sick. Like, I want to improve quality of life, not detract from it. And so we're trying to figure out what that looks like. I think that the goal, or at least my mission, is to end suffering, not only in animals, but in people as well. So we have an opportunity, what we're doing in animals, to see how these things really can work. Hopefully our human physicians will recognize and will be able to advance therapy as well through our work in the veterinary world. So I'm going to be presenting some information with what we're doing. I don't have all the answers. I don't have large numbers. We've been doing this for a couple years, but we are absolutely passionate. I've got an incredible hospital team. I've got a group of cancer technicians that, Victoria, you've gotten to work with, and Shannon, and we're doing some incredible stuff with some vaccine technology again in this realm. And so, as horrible as cancer is, and as horrible as the experiences that I've seen, I am more optimistic now than at any other time that we're going to get close. And I can't say that that was the case over this last 50 years with the path that we were on previously. That is inspirational to me. That's what drives me to become superhuman, as you would say, and to read and digest as much information as I can and to move the dial forward for our veterinary patients, one patient at a time. But my goal is through the efforts and the sacrifice in some instances of where we are, that we're really going to advance medicine on both fronts for both humans and pets. So it's a privilege, Victoria. I am so excited to be able there. I almost have to pinch myself when I think about standing up on stage and being able to present this crazy road and this crazy journey that I've been on with, again, some people that I think are just so incredible and brilliant. And I'm humbled, to be able to come out there. But I'm really, really excited for the opportunity.
Well, we're honored to have you with us. Just the work you're doing is so important. And, having the platform that we have with Metabolic Health Summit and bringing people like you together is how we can kind of build collaborations. And, I know that's where a lot of different scientists have met. And that's how this whole thing is going to get propelled forward, is by presenting the current evidence, maybe discussing what some of the findings what you've done, your experience at your practice is just that in and of itself, I think really has the potential to change the game when it comes to the way we treat cancer in animals. I mean, you've really taken the Ketopet protocol and turned it into something so much more, and really the sky's the limit, and how you're intertwining hyperbaric medicine alongside the ketogenic diet, and then some of these other sort of therapies that you just listed. I just cannot wait for your presentation, and if you don't have your tickets to come see Dr. Loren Nations yet, you definitely want to get them, because this guy right here is really leading the way when it comes to veterinary medicine and really whole animal care, and just has a heart of gold and also just a brilliant mind. So we're really thankful to have you with us in January in Los Angeles. It's going to be a lot of fun, and really is going to be this, I think, just the start of even more work that needs to happen in 2019. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And how can people, between now and the conference, how can people find more information about you, whether it's websites, whether it's the Hyperbaric Medical Association you're associated with? How can people find more information between now and January?
Yeah, that's a pretty good question. As far as the hyperbaric, if you go to the IHMA website, it's the International Hyperbaric Medical Association website, that'll just give you some information on hyperbaric oxygen therapy specifically. Right now I've kind of been hiding under a rock, so to speak.
I'm trying to pull you out.
Yeah, and so really, I don't have a Twitter account. Obviously we've had a little technical difficulty with the Facebook page, but I am getting ready to speed up as far as being able to create some information and some content. So I guess I would probably, if you truly have some information, I would put you towards our website, which is vhavets.com. And that's my hospital, and you can email through that portal. We'll certainly try and answer any of your questions. If you've got specific questions, obviously send you to the Ketopet Sanctuary website for ketogenic information. But we're always willing to help. Hopefully by the time, well, not hopefully, but certainly by the time that the summit comes around in February, we'll have a dedicated web page, an ability to get information out there. So we're going to start creating some content. Really, right, what I've been doing over these last 2 years is just trying to figure it out. We've just been working crazy, trying to make sure that everything that we're doing is real, and it's it is what it is. And so we're really excited about being able to present. So I feel like, stay tuned. Like, I'm not going anywhere. When I start getting some real information, we'll start getting on Facebook and kind of moving forward with that. So I appreciate everybody's interest, and we're working hard to, as I say, put a dent in cancer, because that's my goal.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, we're excited to have you in January. Excited for the content. Hopefully that's coming soon. You guys can follow Veterinary Healthcare Associates, which is their Facebook page. They do post some great stuff, and hopefully we'll be doing maybe another live here soon on the ketogenic diet for canines. But Dr. Loren Nations, you're such an amazing resource for pet parents. I know you do such great work with the people that you currently serve, and you're going to impact the lives of so many more people. And we can't wait for you to present in January. So looking forward to that. And thank you all for watching and bearing with our technical difficulties. But find Dr. Nations online, and we will be seeing you it's 3.5 months away, 98 days to be exact.
I got to put my presentation together.
Yes. You got to get to work. I'll let you go and start using PowerPoint. And what's that?
What do I have? 4 hours?
Say that one more time.
How much time do I have for my presentation? 4 hours, or do I need to trim that down a little bit?
Yeah. No, Dr. Nations actually has a Dr. Nations day at Metabolic Health. Kidding. No, it's going to be a lot of fun. And our mission with Metabolic Health Summit is to, you're really the first veterinarian that we have that will be presenting there. We also have Dr. Royal and Dr. Lilly, who are going to be talking a little bit about their work with Royal Animal Health University and the ketogenic diet. But really, this is the first step to where we hope that we can include animals in our next year, 2020. We can have an even bigger veterinarian track where we can really seriously discuss the state of health with our animals and what we're feeding them, and how metabolic therapy can be just as powerful as a tool in humans. So that's a really exciting thing, as well as hyperbaric medicine. So I can't wait to continue the conversation with you, Dr. Nations, offline. And for everybody watching, thank you so much. Make sure you get your early bird tickets. Prices go up November 1st. So coming up quick. So thanks, Dr. Nations. We'll see you soon.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much, Victoria.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.